Welcome to Beer Stories for Private Equity. Join us for our weekly happy hour, tapping into 27 years of PE experience, one pint at a time. Beer Stories for Private Equity is powered by Monogram Group.
Today, we're joined by Kris Kluver at kriskluver.com.
And for Monogram Group, here's your host, Scott Markman.
Please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to Beer Stories for Private Equity. I'm Scott Markman, your host. And joining us today from Leadville, Colorado, which I have been to and eaten at a restaurant or two on Main Street. Say hi to Kris Kluver. Kris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Scott. Thank you, man, so much for having me on. I'm humbled and I'm excited about today.
Awesome. So I always like to get the backstory, the why, leading up to what you do today. So I want to start with your background. Where you were raised and where did you go to college?
Born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. So I'm a Midwesterner. And I got hold of a little tiny bit of Berkshire Hathaway stock when I was young. So I'd go to some of those meetings and spent time in that space, which is kind of cool. I went to school at the prestigious University of Wyoming, where I got a home economics degree and a 2.7 cumulative GPA. So
you're sure it wasn't 2.8? I just want to clarify this.
No, okay, it might have been a 2.75. So if we're rounding out, there'd be some positives with that.
Nice.
So growing up, my dad was an attorney. My mom was a high school principal. And I had I learned things differently, more along the lines of like a dyslexic sort of area. And because of that, I never really felt like I fit in. I would have to figure out different mechanics and just work my ass off. And it was something that I think was hard for my parents too, because they just didn't understand it. There was a lot of blunt force trauma in learning how to spell and how to do things that are just, in my opinion, fucking useless, but that's the way it is now. But I was good at business, and I've always been able to connect dots. And I started my first of 16 companies when I was 19.
Time out. I must admit, we've talked before. I didn't know you have started 16 companies. That would put you squarely in the middle of being a serial entrepreneur.
Serial entrepreneur. And I realized it took me a while to figure out that it's also one of my shortcomings is I'm easily distracted by shiny objects. I really love the metric and success of money, but I don't really give a shit about it. It's a great way to keep score, but I would get to where I would solve the main problem sometimes in a business and I get distracted and go want to do something different. And It took me a long time to kind of figure out where I fit with it. Going on though, I started my first company at the University of Wyoming where I did clothing design, manufacture, and wholesale. Back in the 90s when I started this, it was actually the 80s. Today, if you say, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, that's kind of a badge of honor and people are excited and people aspire to that and people respect it. If you said it back then, you were destined to be ostracized and your likelihood of ever getting into a corporate type of gig was almost none. So went through that and had the good fortune to get a little bit of success through that, learned a few things and realized that this is kind of what I want to do. And I worked in other places and it took me a long time to figure it out. But through that, I have always been a student of learning. So I'm not necessarily a big fan of education in the formal sense, especially modern education. I'm a fellow at University of York in the UK. I've done advisory work with universities. I think that all those dynamics are changing at light speed. And I think to be a great leader now, you have to truly be always curious, always wanting to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree with that.
I've taken, I don't know how many courses, and I've studied entrepreneurial strategy at Harvard Business School. So I'm a little bit on the ham-fisted side with some of it, but if I find something I really like, I tend to do really, really well with it.
So how did that then sort of pivot into your main focus today, which is consulting and coaching? Rolling up that 16 companies, it's sort of packaging what you've learned and experienced and accomplished into an advisory coaching paradigm.
Of those companies, I have built them, I've bought them, I've wrecked them, I've gone through partners. So the fact that I've been an operator and in the weeds for over 35 years and I've had a few exits, that really has tremendous value. It's an unbelievable education, but it's not one that you can buy. That one is all with, scars and battlefields to get through to achieve that. And how I said I like to bounce around a lot. it took me a long time to realize that that's actually one of my gifts, is because I can bounce around a lot. I'm pretty selective with who I work with, but when I do work with them, I get very intimate, but it's enough that I can stay very focused and help them and solve problems in a different way than they have because of the gift, the way my head is wired, not the way other people were. Today, I have companies that are in aerospace, AI, crypto, construction, pharmaceuticals. It's all over the charts. And I can take little pieces and parts from those different ones and apply them in different ways. The analogy I like to use is I had a partner for one company, and guy was just brilliant, amazing human, great salesperson. But when it came to doing entrepreneurial type of thinking, the guy was dumb as a box of hammers. He just couldn't see it, couldn't connect the dots. I can connect those dots. So I use the idea that if you and I are both looking at a beautiful, bright red rose, and I see Technicolor and you see black and white, we see the same thing, but we don't see the same thing. And when we can start to help understand and what are our gifts, where is it we're exceptional? And this is one of the things I work at with leaders and in our peer groups, is to help people figure out what are they exceptional at. And just because you can kind of do that other stuff doesn't necessarily mean you're exceptional at it. How do we figure out what your God-given talent is so that you can elevate to that and really truly thrive in those spaces?
So I'm thinking about, I'm listening and I'm thinking about my own experience and my own education, my own sort of journey through owning a company, along with what we are hired to do and who I've worked with, and expanding and evolving my own skill set and knowledge and interest. I'm a BFA in design, and I love design, and our agency produces a ton of creative. I don't do it. But what I have become is, kind of a brand advisory consultant person, and I'm in the intersection of, private equity and the companies they own, and applying the broad knowledge of brand into these particular circumstances and needs. And it's like, this is pretty far removed from what I was formally educated for. I have a business background, but really this came out of the long meandering journey of owning a company that is involved with advising companies on stuff. And just what we advise them on has evolved. But there's a corollary to what you just said, which is you've taken experience and learnings from a variety of situations and mashed them together into a point of view and a reservoir of stuff that is relevant and valuable to a broad range of folks. And I think that's pretty cool.
No offense, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I think that I know what you guys do and how extraordinary that is. And that's just not mechanical. There's got to be a shitload of creativity in that. Now, is it putting pen to paper? Is it doing a CAD system? No, but the creativity that's being integrated with that. I love the creative aspect of understanding. If I find somebody has a business, I don't care if it's a hot dog stand, I'm going to start asking them questions. And I end up coming up with different ways of helping them look at things and grow in a different way. My values really matter to me. One is always curious, always learning. One is fearlessly giving first for the betterment of others. This took me a long time as well, just to figure out a positive, intentional way of challenging someone. I will connect something from, coffee houses and wine bars that apply to aerospace, and they're like, how the hell? Well,
I love that.
Wait a minute. What if we tried? And I'm not smart enough to not be embarrassed about asking really stupid, silly questions. But that to me is where innovation really lives. And then the last piece with it is, somewhere along the line, I learned to really embrace being audacious and completely unreasonable. And one of the key things that I look for if I'm working with a group or an individual is, are these people willing to really dream big, like way out there? Because if you want to grow 20% next year, there's a lot of ways to do that. And that's what most people's default is. And really, the default way of achieving that usually is, well, we'll just put our head down and work harder. That is not where innovation lives. That is not where extraordinary lives. Extraordinary lives when we say, no, we're going to grow 100x in the next 5 years. How are we going to do it? No clue. All right. What does amazing look like? Great. Now, what is a vision? What do we have to figure out in 3 years? Okay, we got to figure this stuff out. Cool. All right. For that to happen, what do we have to do this year? Great. Then we start breaking that down. And then with ruthless but compassionate accountability, we are going to go all in on making sure that we hit those milestones. And we may end up pivoting, And again, I don't want to be critical. If somebody's got a great lifestyle business, right on, good for them. I'm not their huckleberry though. I want people that want to go to the moon.
I want to overlap what you just said to literally what we do, what we believe. But before we do that, I need to do my favorite part of beer storage or private equity, which is to pull out a beer and crack it open and let you know why I picked it and all that good stuff. Having said that, I fucked up today. I forgot to bring a beer to the office. I'm in the office today. And so plan B is our good friends at San Pellegrino in a monogram branded glass. So I'm going to crack open a San Pellegrino and pretend that it's like a fat tire or something from Colorado. How's that?
Nice, nice. Well, and for me, I like to say that when it comes to drinking, I turned pro in the 80s and retired in the early 2000s. So if you see me drinking, um, if you can watch from afar, it'll probably be interesting, but ideally you want to avoid that. So I have a lovely Diet Coke.
Okay. Well, cheers. Cheers to you
Salud.
in a monogram branded glass.
With a Pellegrino, you're
Mm.
such a delicate flower, Scott.
I'm it's like, wipe my face clean. Anyway, what I want to say is this. There's two axioms that we talk about and believe in the work that we do for our clients who tend to live in the world of black and white. We live in the world of gray, which means A, there are no right answers, and B, we live in the world of ideas because ideas are joined at the hip to innovation. The second thing that we say is change is hard, and we're change agents. So that we know that who are our clients when problems we are hired to solve or help them think through to get to a consensus to then go build it, which means that we're going to be developing awesome, great creative stuff, but it's different and change is hard. And even though it may look like a shiny object, there's a little bit of a fear factor going on here because it's not what I've just lived with for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Or when you're mashing me up with these other five guys, we got to play well in the sandbox. That's change. Change is hard. So we apply the craft of change and ideas are gray and they don't exist. And for a lot of the business leaders and private equity professionals that are our clients, they went to business school, they were in the school of hard knocks through, entrepreneurship, and they, their world was quarterly numbers and spreadsheets and provable things, and we were very literate and comfortable in that world as well. But to solve the problems we were hired to solve, you have to live in the world of gray, because otherwise I wouldn't have a job.
So I like the phrase and the phraseology I use because I agree with you. I change it though a little bit from the idea of saying that it's hard to where growth and change only happens in discomfort. If you think about it, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a student, anything that's worth doing, but you achieve that growth and you achieve that change, you want to get to that next level, doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that it's going to be comfortable. So as an endurance athlete, we have something that we do that we call embracing the suck. And what that means is there's a certain point where after a while, you're going to hurt. Where it's that certain part where it's just like, oh my God, this blows. Holy shit. And you get excited because it's like, you know what? I'm there. That means I know I'm growing. This is what's going to make me better. So it's the same thing where how can we avoid that fear and not reaffirm that this is going to be terrible? Maybe it'll be terrible, maybe it won't. I don't know. But there's a saying in the special forces. I coached a couple of Navy SEALs for a while. And one of them was something along the lines in the operators of don't endure any pain until it happens. I used to be the king of that shit. I would get so wrapped around that, oh, this is going to suck. This is going to suck. I was like, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. I gave it 90% worry and 10% just dealing with it.
I would never call myself an endurance athlete, but I'm a runner. So I can listen to what you're saying and kind of relate to it on some base level. Because if you're going to run, you're going to have fatigue, you're going to have muscle soreness, you're going to have the mental, like, I just want to be over with this. And you have to push through it. You just have to, because otherwise you're not going to get why you're there. And when you're done, you kind of go, damn, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk for a second about sort of the three service offerings that you present to the world. Number one, entrepreneurial advisors. Number two, life on your terms. And number three, aspiring solopreneur. And I don't know if that's a made up word or not. But I want to ask you to speak to each one. And then, secondly, why three? Why not just one?
Well,
Why-
that is, to be very blunt, reflective of my shelf life. I seem to be good for about a year and a half on a lot of things until this last round with the advisory work, where I find something, I get excited and I build it. And it fits and it's a good thing. And between the three of those, life on your terms is more of something that helps focus on work-life integration. I believe that work-life balance is bunk. I don't believe it's possible anymore unless you're a monk or a hermit. But I
Mhm.
firmly believe that an intentional work-life integration is. And that
Hmm.
when we start looking at life on a holistic level, it empowers us to realize as soon as you can embrace that, look, for you to be a great husband and a great dad and actually take care of yourself physically, those things are actually going to help you become a better CEO. When you sleep well, that becomes your competitive advantage across the board on everything. And when you do that in a very positive way, there's a lot of ways of integrating that. My wife and I would do a lot of workshops around life on your terms, but we're actually integrating everything into something that we call peer circles. And we're running that under my personal brand, which is Kris with a K, Kluver with a K.com. And we do peer circles, coaching, and advisory. But within that, some groups are going to be focused on maybe it's defining what's that next chapter. They just had a big exit and they want to figure that out. Cool. In other cases, we've got people who are looking to transition to doing different types of startups. And that's where we can take a lot of the tools from the aspiring solopreneur. I realized that I allowed myself to get very distracted. And so we're in the process of creating a community that incorporates all those tools. And then my job as a strategic advisor is to be ultra curious, ultra fearless, and meet people where they're at. And then we help empower people to figure out those tools so that they can become better.
So you, in effect, have through the peer circles, you can take this wealth of knowledge and experience and point of view that you have and apply them in different relevant ways to these
Absolutely.
these these clusters, right?
Right. So imagine you got a PE firm. Your J curve is just getting hammered right now, or your liquidity cycle is a shit show. And it's like, holy smokes, we actually need to figure out how to run these businesses better.
Yeah.
And maybe you have operators, maybe you don't, maybe you have tools, maybe you don't, but having an independent group where you could put, 10 of your CEOs that are your porcos into one place where they can learn about how can we become better leaders? Because nobody actually teaches leadership. Where is it we can get together in a very confidential, safe environment for group problem solving? So that when people are buried in the quagmire of imposter syndrome and they're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. going, holy shit, how the hell am I gonna, helping them with that. And then lastly, embracing the idea that with great disruption comes great opportunities. But we are going to see the most disruption possibly of our lifetimes, possibly the human race in the next 5 years. And if people are not taking a breath and stepping back and figuring that out,
Yep.
they're going to get run over by a freight train.
I couldn't agree more. And you have advised 150 companies, and you've taken four to nearly $1 billion market cap. I want to see if you can spend a few minutes taking one, and you can choose to name names or not, but give a case study because that's a paradigm. It's the goal of a whole lot of people is to take something and scale it to unimaginable heights. So what was the category? How big was the company when you started? What was the toughest challenge for leadership to confront? What was the breakthrough moment?
Well, there's a lot there. One is, and I'm sure he would be fine with it, it's a company called Exodus, but they're a non-custodial crypto wallet. We achieved the largest Regulation A in history. We got them up on the New York Stock Exchange several months ago, where they uplisted to the New York Stock Exchange. And depending on the day, the market cap can bounce anywhere between $1.2 billion and $2 billion. It's a Nebraska-based company, and when we started, they were just getting into the 8-figure range. They've been able to bounce up from that. I'd say that CEO is one of the people I'm most proud of as far as his personal growth. and seeing what he's been able to do. One of the keys that I'm looking for if I choose to work with somebody is, one, are they willing to be truly audacious? The second piece, are they in an industry and are they willing to do something that's incredibly disruptive? That in and of itself, everybody can be right now, but not everybody's necessarily willing to be. You can be disruptive in mundane industries, but you have to look at things in different ways. I've been talking with a couple of fairly good-sized bankers that are owners of private banks in the $7 billion range. Not huge, but an understanding that I think like the banking industry is just going to get destroyed. And if they aren't thinking and they're not willing to be disruptive, and they say, well, this is how we've always done it, then I'm probably not going to work with them. But the biggest thing, the biggest key is a self-awareness and a willingness to engage. And what I mean by that is, does the senior leader realize that they're becoming the choke point in growth, that they're becoming the limiting factor? And are they willing to really invest in themselves to become stronger and better? Because the people are always like, Kluver, what do you do? It's like, in short, the skills it takes to get from here to here are different than it takes to get from here to here. And I help people figure out that part. How do we look at it differently? So once you have that as a start, and I'll pause and you tell me, what do you think of that, Scott? Where's your head go with it?
No, I like where you're going with this, because I'm sort of looking at my question list on my screen here. So take this company, this crypto company you mentioned. What was the breakthrough that, you identified together? The CEO said, yep, I'm going to attack that. And that was the linchpin to start that journey to where it is today. There was like an inflection point, like a moment. You go, yep, we're going to attack that. And you guys attacked it and you crushed it.
I have to say, I don't know that there's really been those hard inflection points, because it depends. When I started working with them and the others, I like to say that every organization, individual, leadership team, even couples, are at one of four phases, which is stabilize, visualize, strategize, and execute. So what I mean by that is if I want to talk about visualization and defining where you want to go and really challenge somebody's thinking, I may be brilliant at it, but if they're running around with their hair on fire playing whack-a-mole, it's going to go in one ear and out the other, no matter what. So sometimes we have to figure out, how do we step back and get those people to actually breathe, take a step and figure out, no, how do we start getting some arbitrage in time and helping them to start understand that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And we start figuring out what is our true gift and how do we elevate and delegate it. And that can be murky. It can take sometimes a year or two. I guess probably the biggest key in the inflection point is when we start destroying boundaries and boxes in what is possible. If you knew without any shadow of a doubt you couldn't fail, what would absolutely fucking amazing look like? And we set a certain time period. And people usually start here. Like, no. What if I gave you $2 billion and held a gun to your head? What would you do? Oh, well, then I could go here. Okay, but it's starting to think that, and when people start realizing, when people start getting that visualization, wow, we could do that. And then you get these people who are brilliant and they have the ability to see what that path is, even if it's lumpy and even if it's got holes, then they can become a sewer rat on a candy wrapper, and they are not going to let go till they change the world. But it's helping to get that process there. And then the strategy piece is, once we start defining that, then we come up with a very simplified way of doing it. I steal from Mark Twain when I'm working with an entire team. He said, "I'm sorry this letter's so long. I didn't have time to write a short one." We invest the time to write a very short, simple letter. I think it's the number one obligation of a CEO, and most CEOs suck at it, is to be crystal clear on where are we going. Then from there, we get into the mechanics, and we build a functional accountability structure that's scalable. People are structure first, people second. What is it that we need, that we know, and then we're going to be able to just blow this out of the water to hit the next levels. Then we'll set up certain rubrics that we hit this financial measure, we bring this person in, we fill these seats. Then we build a plan, very, very simple version, and then we're going to hold each other accountable with ruthless but compassionate accountability. Because when you fill those seats and you put absolute total badasses in those seats who buy into the vision, who share your values, know where they're going, and they know how they're going to measure each week whether they're winning or losing, those people are like, give it to me. I want that. And when you start orchestrating that, that's when I don't give a shit what the business is. Those are the companies that can go through the roof.
From all of us at Monogram Group, thanks for tuning in to Beer Stories for Private Equity,
Episode 21.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified as we release new episodes. Please check out the show notes in the description from today's episode. Our email is podcast@monogramgroup.com. Feel free to email us with any comments or questions, and we'll try to answer them in our next episode.